In the years following the Mexican American War, the United States faced a question that would dominate national politics for decades. Would slavery be allowed in the new territories acquired from Mexico? This debate, fierce, emotional, and deeply divisive, would set the stage for political realignments, sectional rivalries, and, ultimately, civil war. From the Wilmot Proviso to the Compromise of 1850, the nation wrestled with finding a solution to a problem that, quite frankly, seemed to have no middle ground. Let's get started. Even before the Mexican American War had ended, Congress was already discussing how to govern the new lands. In 1846, during debates over appropriating money for the war, Representative David Wilmot of Pennsylvania, an anti slavery Democrat, introduced an amendment that shocked many. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude would be permitted in any part of said territory. This proposal became known as the Wilmot Proviso. It passed in the House of Representatives, where the North held greater influence, but it was defeated in the Senate, where Southerners maintained the balance of power. Though it never became law, the Wilmot Proviso intensified the sectional divide and it kept the question of slavery squarely in the national spotlight. As the debate dragged on, President James K. Polk suggested a compromise: extend the Missouri Compromise line westward to the Pacific Ocean, banning slavery north of the line and allowing it south of the line. Others favored a different approach: let the people in each territory decide for themselves whether or not to allow slavery. Initially called squatter sovereignty and later renamed to the more respectable popular sovereignty, the idea had the appearance of democracy. In reality, it allowed Congress to avoid making the politically dangerous decision themselves. The question of slavery's expansion into new territories carried over into the presidential election of 1848. The Whig Party won the White House with their candidate, Zachary Taylor, but a new political force emerged. Former President Martin Van Buren ran on the ticket of the newly formed Free Soil Party, which opposed the expansion of slavery. Van Buren lost the election but made an impact, earning 10% of the popular vote and helping elect 10 free soilers to Congress. This was a clear sign that the slavery issue was growing and that the nation's two party system was headed toward collapse in the 1850s. The discovery of gold in California in 1848 triggered a massive influx of settlers, making it clear that the region needed a functioning government. Under its existing law, Congress was responsible for deciding whether a new territory would allow slavery. President Taylor proposed a simple solution: admit California directly as a state, letting its own citizens decide on the matter. By October of 1849, Californians had drafted a state constitution outlawing slavery, not out of a moral opposition, but to prevent wealthy slave owning capitalists from dominating the gold fields. But California's request to enter the Union as a free state sent shockwaves through the South. In 1849, the balance between free and slave states stood at 15 states each. The admission of California would tip the scales. Southern leaders feared that the addition of New Mexico, Oregon, and Utah, all possible future free states, would further weaken their political power. Some Southern radicals were already speaking openly about secession rather than accepting what they saw as surrender. In the winter of 1849 into 1850, Senator Henry Clay, now in his 70s, made one last effort to preserve the Union. On January 29, 1850, he presented a sweeping proposal that would become known as the Compromise of 1850. In this compromise, California would be admitted as a free state. Territorial governments would be established in the remainder of the lands taken from Mexico, with no restrictions on slavery. There would be the abolition of the slave trade, but not slavery itself in Washington, D.C. And lastly, there would be a new, stricter fugitive slave law that would be enforced more rigorously in the North. Clay's bills set off a 7-month debate in Congress. Lawmakers fought bitterly over each provision, reflecting the deepening sectional divide. But by mid September of 1850, all components had passed, and California entered the Union as the 31st state. For a few years, the Compromise of 1850 seemed to bring peace. Economic prosperity and rapid growth helped calm tempers, but the issues at its core, the expansion of slavery, the balance of political power, and the threat of secession, never truly went away. The compromise was, in reality, a fragile truce. The North and South were still on a collision course, and the question of slavery would return, fiercer than ever, in the decade ahead. From the Wilmot Proviso to the Compromise of 1850, the late 1840s and early 1850s were defined by the nation's struggle to balance expansion with unity. Popular sovereignty, party politics, and last ditch compromises all failed to resolve the core conflict. The Union had bought itself time, but not a solution. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.